Have you ever been told you didn't belong, even when you knew you had every right to be there? Imagine stepping onto a plane, holding a first-class ticket you paid for, only to be told calmly, coldly, that your seat isn't yours. Not because of a mistake, not because of a system error, but because of who you are. In that moment, what would you do? Would you argue, shout, demand justice? Or would you stay silent, swallow the humiliation, and simply move to another seat? This isn't just a story about a flight. It's about a choice. A woman faced that moment of indignity in front of strangers, and instead of losing her composure, she chose something no one saw coming. She didn't just take another seat. She bought the airline. What would you do if you had that power, and what does it mean for all of us? When dignity is finally given a seat at the table, stay with us as we unfold a true story of injustice, resilience, and transformation. And before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that matter. The terminal at JFK International buzzed like a restless beehive. Rolling suitcases clattered against polished tile floors, and voices blended into a constant murmur that rose and fell with each boarding announcement. Among the crowd, a woman walked with unhurried steps. She carried herself with a quiet dignity, not flaunting her status, yet impossible to overlook. Dr. Maya Johnson, 42 years old, had the calm poise of someone who had weathered storms far greater than delayed flights or long security lines. Her navy blazer fit neatly over a crisp white blouse. No designer logos, no flashy jewelry, just simple pearl earrings and a small leather tote she had owned for years. She approached the gate with her boarding pass already open on her phone. Flight 782, New York to London. Seat 2A. First class. The gate agent scanned the pass and waved her forward. But the moment Maya stepped onto the jet bridge and entered the aircraft, the atmosphere shifted. Standing at the front of the cabin was Linda Harris, a flight attendant whose smile faltered as soon as her eyes landed on Maya. Linda's tone sharpened, though she tried to keep it wrapped in politeness. "Excuse me, ma'am," Linda said, blocking the aisle with her arm. "First-class seating is for premium passengers. Are you sure you're in the right section?" Maya glanced at her phone again, though she already knew what it said. "Yes," she replied evenly. "Seat 2A." She handed over the pass. Linda frowned, looking at the screen longer than necessary, as if trying to catch an error that wasn't there. Behind her, Mark Thompson, the purser, stepped forward. His presence added weight to Linda's suspicion. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. "This passenger claims she's assigned to 2A, Linda said, her voice lowered, but not enough that nearby passengers couldn't hear. Mark studied Maya the way one examines something out of place. His lips pressed thin. "Ma'am, could you step aside for a moment while we verify?" The cabin grew quieter. A few heads turned. Whispers began, tiny sparks that threatened to become flames. From across the aisle, a man in a tailored gray suit chuckled. Gregory White, a first-class passenger already settled in his seat, leaned back and smirked. "Finally," he said loud enough for half the cabin to hear, "somebody's keeping standards around here." A ripple of uneasy laughter followed. Maya felt the burn of dozens of eyes on her. Still, she kept her voice steady. "My boarding pass is valid. I purchased this seat." Mark shook his head, dismissive. "Ma'am, we can't hold up the boarding process. Please gather your things and move to the back." There must have been a mistake with your booking. No apology. No attempt to hide the presumption that she did not belong. The words moved to the back echoed louder in Maya's mind than the engines warming outside. She had heard them before, in different forms, in different places. As a child in Detroit, when her father was told to use the side entrance at a bank. As a young graduate student, when a professor doubted her research had truly been her own. And now, at 42, on a plane, she had paid full fare to board. For a brief second, anger surged in her chest, threatening to spill. But she swallowed it. Years of discipline had taught her the cost of reacting too soon. She looked directly at Linda, then at Mark. Her voice was calm, unshaken. "If that's what you insist, I'll take my seat in economy. But remember this moment, with measured steps." She turned, walked past the wide leather seats of first class, and made her way down the narrow aisle. The air felt heavier with every row she passed. Passengers stared, some with pity, others with indifference. Gregory White muttered something under his breath and laughed again. Maya finally reached row 35, middle seat. A man already dozing by the window shifted reluctantly, giving her just enough space to slide in. She placed her tote under the seat and exhaled. The seat cushion was thin. The armrests weren't smooth from years of use. The hum of voices in economy was sharper, less hushed, than the quiet luxury she had walked away from. Here, there were no champagne flutes waiting, no wide recliners, no polite small talk about weekend golf trips. She folded her hands in her lap, staring at the seat back inches from her face. The sting of humiliation was real, yet beneath it, a familiar fire stirred. Maya Johnson had faced ceilings made of glass and walls made of steel. This, she thought, was just another door someone had tried to shut in her face. Only this time, they had no idea who they were dealing with. And for now, she let the plane take off in silence. Because storms are not fought in aisles or arguments. They are fought in boardrooms. And Maya was about to remind the world of that truth. The plane had taken off, engines roaring like a distant thunderstorm. Passengers settled into their seats, adjusting pillows, pulling out books, or scrolling through glowing screens. In the cramped middle seat of row 35, Dr. Maya Johnson sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the thin blue curtain that separated economy from the world she had been forced out of. It was just fabric, a simple partition, yet it symbolized so much more. On the surface, Maya looked composed, almost serene. She breathed slowly, carefully, as if she were meditating, but inside, a storm brewed, not of rage, but of memory. Maya Johnson had lived her entire life being told what she could not do. She was born in Detroit, in a neighborhood where the paint peeled off brick walls and sidewalks cracked beneath children's sneakers. Her father, Harold Johnson, worked double shifts at an auto plant, his hands permanently stained with grease. Her mother, Lorraine, worked as a nurse, moving from patient to patient with patients that seemed impossible to sustain. From them, Maya learned two things: the dignity of labor and the cruelty of limitation. As a girl, she remembered standing in line with her father at a bank, watching him politely request a small business loan. She remembered the manager's cold glance, the subtle shake of his head before the paperwork was even reviewed. "We're not able to extend credit at this time," he had said, his tone dripping with finality. Maya had tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering, "Why didn't he even look?" Harold had simply placed a hand on her shoulder and murmured, "Because sometimes they don't see us, baby. But one day, you'll make them look." That memory was a fire that never burned out. At school, Maya excelled, though her brilliance was often questioned. A teacher once accused her of plagiarizing a science project because students like you don't usually produce work like this. She carried that accusation like a scar. One more reminder of the invisible chains others tried to wrap around her. Yet she kept climbing. Scholarship by scholarship. She built her path out of Detroit. She studied economics at Howard, then finance at Wharton. She interned at firms where she was the only black woman in the room, where colleagues confused her for an assistant instead of the strategist she truly was. She smiled, corrected them, and worked twice as hard. By 35, she had launched her own private equity firm. By 42, she had become one of the most formidable investors on Wall Street, managing billions in assets. She had sat across tables from billionaires, heads of state, CEOs with names etched into skyscrapers, and time after time, she had looked them in the eye and reminded them that brilliance wore no color and dignity carried no gender. And yet, here she was, pushed out of seat 2A like she didn't belong. The irony was sharp. The same airline whose cabin crew treated her as an intruder was partly financed by a company in which she owned significant shares. But Linda Harris and Mark Thompson didn't know that. To them, she was just another passenger. To Gregory White, she was someone to mock. To the strangers in first class, she was an anomaly that didn't fit the picture they carried in their minds. Maya inhaled deeply, leaning back into the rigid seat. The recycled air smelled faintly of plastic and overcooked chicken. She let her eyes close for a moment, and when she opened them again, she found herself staring at a little girl 2 rows ahead. The child, maybe 9 or 10, was black too. Her hair was tied in small braids with colorful beads at the ends. She peeked over the top of the seat, eyes wide and curious. When she caught Maya looking, she smiled shyly, as if to say she understood. Maya returned the smile, a small but genuine curve of her lips. In that moment, she felt the weight of responsibility. She wasn't just carrying her own pride. She was carrying the silent hopes of countless others who had been pushed to the margins. The little girl's smile wasn't just innocent curiosity. It was a reminder people were watching. People were learning from what she chose to do next. The cabin lights dimmed as the flight attendants began their service. Linda passed by with the drink cart, avoiding Maya's gaze, pretending not to see her. The sting of dismissal cut deeper than words. Maya looked down at her lap, where her phone rested. A message blinked on the screen. It was from Daniel Brooks, her longtime advisor and closest confidant. Daniel had been with her since the early days of her firm. Smart, loyal, and fearless. He had a knack for reading numbers and people with equal precision. His message was short, just 3 words. Everything is ready. Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a second, doubt crept in. Was she letting her emotions steer her judgment? Was it wise to let a personal insult fuel a professional move of such magnitude? She closed her eyes, hearing her father's voice again. One day, you'll make them look. Yes. This was that day. Her decision solidified like steel. She typed back, "We move tomorrow." The little girl 2 rows ahead turned again, catching Maya's eye. This time, Maya didn't just smile. She nodded slightly, a silent promise that the next time that child boarded a plane, she would see a world that welcomed her instead of doubting her. Maya adjusted her seatbelt, leaned back, and allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The humiliation of the past hour was real, but it was temporary. In less than a week, the name Dr. Maya Johnson would be etched into the foundation of the very airline that had tried to push her aside. And when that happened, She would not simply sit in seat 2A. She would own the sky above it. The engines hummed steadily, the plane soaring eastward across the Atlantic. Most passengers were asleep, lulled by the rhythm of flight. But Maya remained awake, her mind sharp, her heart steady, because for women like her, rest could wait, justice could not. The cabin settled into its nighttime rhythm. Overhead bins clicked shut, the hum of the engines leveled into a steady drone, and the air inside grew warm and stale. In row 35, wedged between a snoring businessman and a restless teenager tapping at his phone, Dr. Maya Johnson sat in silence. Economy was always cramped, but tonight it felt even smaller. The seat back in front of her pressed close, barely 20 inches away. Her knees brushed the hard plastic tray table. The armrests cut into her sides, offering no relief. The contrast between what she had paid for wide leather recliners, champagne service, quiet privacy, and what she had been forced into could not have been sharper. Maya adjusted slightly, careful not to wake the man to her left. He had already claimed the armrest, his elbow heavy and immovable. To her right, the teenager's music leaked faintly through earbuds, a steady thump that beat against her thoughts. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she let the discomfort fade, and instead, she listened inwardly. What rose to the surface was not the sting of Linda Harris's cutting words, or Mark Thompson's cold dismissal. It was not even Gregory White's smirk. It was the echo of her own father's voice, carried from decades earlier. Remember, Maya, Harold Johnson had told her, when they push you down, you don't fight on their level. You rise higher. You rise so high, they have no choice but to see you. Those words had guided her through college classrooms where professors doubted her, through boardrooms where she was the only black woman at the table, through nights when she stared at spreadsheets and wondered if the sacrifices were worth it. Tonight, those words anchored her again. But even with that anchor, she was human, and humans hurt. She thought about how public the humiliation had been, about the looks on other passengers' faces. Some had been indifferent, turning away, unwilling to get involved. Others had looked at her with sympathy. But sympathy was its own kind of wound, pity dressed as compassion. What no one had offered was solidarity. She inhaled deeply, letting the air burn through her chest, then exhaled slowly. Her phone buzzed in her lap. She lifted it just enough to see the screen glow. Another message from Daniel Brooks. Stay calm. Remember why we started this. Tomorrow is the move. Maya tapped the screen off again. She didn't need the reminder. Not really. But it steadied her to know Daniel was watching the same horizon. The teenager beside her shifted, muttering under his breath. The businessman snored louder. Maya found herself staring again at the thin blue curtain, just a few rows away. That divided economy from first class. Such a small piece of fabric. Yet it represented a line drawn through society who was deemed worthy and who was not. She hated how familiar it felt. At 9 years old, she had been told by a neighbor's mother that she couldn't come inside to play because we don't mix like that. At 17, she had been warned by a guidance counselor to aim realistically when she said she wanted to apply to Ivy League schools. At 23, she had been told by a senior banker that clients would never take direction from someone like you. Every time, she had pushed forward, and every time, she had succeeded. And yet, sitting here in row 35, it felt like no amount of success could shield her from being pulled back to the margins. She leaned her head against the window, cool glass pressing into her temple. Outside, The night stretched endless and black, punctured by tiny stars. The plane carved its way through the dark, carrying hundreds of souls toward London. A soft movement caught her eye. The little girl with the braids, the same one who had smiled at her earlier, peeked over her seat again. The beads in her hair clicked softly as she tilted her head. Her mother was asleep beside her, a blanket pulled up to her chin. The girl whispered, just loud enough for Maya to hear over the drone of the engines. "Why did they make you move?" Maya blinked. The innocence in the child's question pierced deeper than any insult. She hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people forget that we all belong the same." The girl frowned. "That's not fair." "No," Maya agreed, "it isn't." The girl's small face hardened with the seriousness only children can muster. "When I grow up, I'll sit in the front. No one can stop me." Maya smiled gently. "And when you do, I'll be cheering for you." The girl grinned, satisfied with the promise, and slid back down in her seat. Maya turned back to the window, tears stinging her eyes, not of weakness, but of recognition. She knew she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for that little girl, for every little boy and girl who deserved to grow up in a world where dignity wasn't rationed out by skin color. The flight attendants passed again with their carts, offering water and small packets of pretzels. Linda didn't look at Maya. She didn't need to. The silence was insult enough. Maya took the pretzels, thanked the other attendant curtly, and tucked the bag away. She wasn't hungry. Instead, she pulled out her notebook. She always carried one, even in the age of tablets and smartphones. There was something grounding about pen on paper. She opened to a fresh page and wrote only one line. "Never again will they make me move." Her handwriting was steady, each letter pressed into the paper like a vow. As the hours stretched on, Maya tried to rest, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She replayed the moment at the boarding door again and again, analyzing it like she analyzed a hostile takeover. Linda's narrowing eyes, Mark's dismissive tone, Gregory White's laughter. Each detail burned sharper, not duller, with repetition. And then, unbidden, she thought of Edward Collins, the CEO of Aero Sky Group, a man who had once dismissed her proposal in a boardroom with a wave of his hand. Interesting, he had said, but not practical. She remembered the sting of being ignored, even when her analysis had been flawless. She remembered promising herself then that one day she would have the leverage to make men like him listen. The humiliation of this flight was fuel poured on an old fire. She didn't just want justice. She wanted transformation, not revenge for herself, but reform for everyone who would ever step onto a plane after her. Her father's words whispered again, "Rise so high they have no choice but to see you." Maya closed the notebook, slid it back into her bag, and leaned into the window. The stars outside blurred as her eyes grew heavy at last. When she woke, dawn would be breaking, and with it, so would a reckoning. London greeted them with a curtain of gray skies and drizzle. The plane touched down at Heathrow with a jolt, and the cabin filled with the restless shuffle of passengers eager to escape cramped seats. Maya rose from row 35 as calmly as she had entered it. She gathered her tote, stepped into the aisle, and waited her turn like everyone else. Linda Harris stood near the exit door, her professional smile restored as if the night before had not happened. Mark Thompson was beside her, murmuring polite goodbyes. Neither looked at Maya, but Maya looked at them. One long, steady glance, not hostile, but unforgettably firm. the kind of glance that carved itself into memory. Linda shifted slightly, as though a chill had passed through her. By the time Maya stepped into Heathrow's bustling terminal, the humiliation had cooled into clarity. She pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed Daniel Brooks. He picked up on the first ring. "You made it?" "I did," she said. Her voice carried no trace of exhaustion, though she hadn't slept more than an hour. "Are we ready?" Daniel exhaled into the line. "Everything's in place. The filings are clean. The partners are committed. If you give the word, we move." Maya paused at a window overlooking the rain-slicked tarmac. Planes glided across the runways like giant steel birds. People hurried with umbrellas, faceless in the drizzle. She imagined Linda's words echoing again, moved to the back. "I've decided," Maya said. "We move today." Daniel was silent for a beat. Then, steady as ever, he said, "Then today is the beginning." They didn't need more words. Between them, understanding flowed without clutter. Maya ended the call, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the car waiting to take her into the city. The ride into Canary Wharf was slow, traffic heavy with commuters. Rain streaked the windows, distorting the skyline of London's financial heart. Skyscrapers loomed like glass sentinels, each one housing the ambitions and fears of thousands of people. Inside the car, Maya's mind wrestled quietly. This move was not just about her pride, it was about principle. Yet she could not deny the personal sting that sharpened her resolve. Was she letting anger guide her, or was anger simply the match that lit a fire long overdue? Her father's voice returned again. "Rise higher." By the time the car pulled up in front of a tower of steel and glass, her doubt had quieted. She was not doing this for herself alone. She was doing it for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong in seat 2A. Inside the building, Daniel Brooks was already waiting. His tall frame, salt and pepper hair, and calm demeanor made him look every bit the strategist he was. He held a folder in one hand, his other tucked neatly into his coat pocket. "You look steady," he said as they shook hands. "I am steady," Maya replied. They entered the conference room where their small but formidable team had gathered. Lawyers, analysts, and two silent partners who controlled significant stakes in Aerosky Group. The air hummed with anticipation. Daniel spread the documents across the polished table. "Here's where we stand. Between your firm and our partners here, we control 42%, enough to demand changes. If Collins resists, we push for a takeover." The name landed like a stone. Edward Collins, CEO of Aerosky Group. Arrogant, untouchable, the face of an empire. Maya remembered sitting across from him 3 years ago, presenting a restructuring plan that would have saved Aerosky millions. He hadn't even let her finish before brushing her aside. "Thank you, Dr. Johnson, but this is a matter for people with real experience." She had swallowed her pride then, but now the balance had shifted. "Collins doesn't know yet," Maya asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. He will soon. The filings hit by morning." The team leaned in as Maya opened her tote and placed her notebook on the table. The fresh page, the vow written in her own hand. "Never again will they make me move." "This isn't just about numbers," Maya said softly. "It's about culture. It's about dignity. If Aerosky thinks they can treat passengers like I was treated last night, then they've forgotten who keeps them in the air. This is not revenge. This is reform." One of the lawyers cleared her throat. "The press will see it as personal." Maya's gaze was unwavering. "Let them. Sometimes personal stories are the only way people understand systemic problems." Daniel nodded. She's right. A story like this could shake the industry, and it's overdue. The room fell silent. Outside, rain tapped against the glass like a steady drumbeat. Inside, the decision crystallized. Maya looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. We move now. By the end of this week, Aerosky will not belong to Edward Collins. It will belong to us. Agreement rippled through the room. Papers were signed, calls placed, instructions whispered into phones. The machinery of power began to turn. But even as the plan advanced, Maya's thoughts flickered back to the little girl on the plane. The way her braids had clicked when she whispered, "That's not fair." This was for her. Hours later, as twilight settled over London, Maya stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her suite. The Thames snaked dark and silver through the city. Lights blinked on in the towers, each window a story of ambition, of struggle, of triumph and defeat. Daniel joined her, a glass of water in hand. "Do you ever think about what comes after?" he asked. "Always," she said, and Maya's reflection in the glass was calm, resolute. "After we win, we build, not just a company, a culture, one where no one is told to move to the back." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then let's make sure we win." Maya turned from the window, the fire in her steady eyes unmistakable, because battles fought in aisles end in silence. But battles fought in boardrooms changed the world. And Maya Johnson was ready to change the sky itself. Morning broke over London with a thin veil of mist. The city's towers rose above it, gray and solemn, as if holding their breath. Inside the Intercontinental on the Thames, Dr. Maya Johnson stirred her tea slowly, staring at the swirl of steam. Her phone buzzed with updates, messages from Daniel, alerts from financial networks, snippets of conversations that hinted the storm had already begun. The filings had hit the market. Aerosky's stock ticked with a nervous flutter, analysts whispering of unusual activity. Maya set the cup down gently, the calm before a quake. A knock at her door. Daniel entered, his face serious but not shaken. He carried a folder thick with fresh reports. "They know," he said. Maya looked at him steadily. Collins. Daniel nodded. "Word reached him overnight. He's not pleased. Calls went out to board members. He's trying to rally them." Maya rose, smoothing her navy dress as though preparing for battle. "Good. Let him rally. The more noise he makes, the more people will pay attention." Daniel laid the folder on the table. "This is where things get messy. Collins won't go quietly. He's a man who believes control is his birthright. He'll fight to keep it." Maya opened the folder. Charts, ownership breakdowns, press clippings, a photograph of Collins at some gala, tuxedo crisp, champagne flute in hand, his smile confident and careless. She remembered his voice again, years ago. This is a matter for people with real experience. She closed the folder softly, then let him fight. But this time, the battlefield isn't his. It's ours. Daniel studied her. "How do you feel?" The question lingered. Maya walked to the window, mist drifting over the Thames, the city beginning its daily rush. "I feel," she said slowly, "like a woman who has carried this weight long enough, and like a girl who once sat in row 35, wondering if dignity was something she had to earn, or if it was hers already." Silence stretched between them. Daniel let it rest. Finally, Maya turned back, her eyes steady. "We proceed." By mid-morning, news outlets had picked up the whispers. Unusual moves on Aerosky shares. Anonymous investors consolidating power. Speculation of a takeover bid in Aerosky's glass headquarters across town. Edward Collins stormed into his office, slamming the door behind him. His assistant trailed nervously, clutching a stack of papers. "Who the hell is behind this?" Collins barked. The assistant stammered. We're still tracing." "Sir, but indications point to Dr. Maya Johnson." Collins froze, his face twisted with incredulity. "Johnson. That consultant. The one we tossed aside." The assistant nodded timidly. Collins' laugh was sharp and humorless. "She thinks she can play at this level, buying scraps of stock like a gambler at a poker table." He paced, hands clenched behind his back. "Set up a board call today and tell legal to prepare a poison pill strategy. If she wants war, she'll get it." The assistant nodded quickly, retreating. Collins stood alone at the window, staring at the skyline he believed he commanded. His reflection glared back, lined with anger. Meanwhile, Maya sat with Daniel and her small team in the hushed calm of their suite. Calls flowed in, offers of support from allies who respected her, subtle nods from board members tired of Collins' arrogance. One call, though, stood apart. Maya. The voice was deep, familiar. "Robert Sterling, chairman of a pension fund that controlled 8% of Aerosky." "Yes, Robert. I saw the filings. Is it true? You're making a move?" Maya did not flinch. "It's true." He sighed heavily. "You know Collins will paint this as reckless. He'll say you're driven by personal vendetta." "He will," Maya agreed calmly. "And he'll be wrong. This is about more than me. It's about culture, respect, the way an airline treats the people who trust it with their lives." Silence stretched. Then Sterling said, "I've never forgotten what he did in that meeting years ago, dismissing you like you were invisible. He's grown careless. You might actually be what this company needs." Maya felt something shift inside her chest. Gratitude, but also the familiar weight of responsibility. "Then stand with me," she said quietly. Another pause. "Then I will." When the call ended, Daniel gave her a thin smile. "That's 8%. Enough to tip the scales." But Maya's thoughts were elsewhere. For all the numbers, the filings, the strategy, what stayed with her was not the percentages. It was the faces. The little girl with braids, the tired mother, even the defiant Gregory White, who had cheered her removal. All of them pieces of a story larger than themselves. By afternoon, the news cycle had erupted. Headlines scrolled across every screen. Black CEO moves against Aerosky. Former consultant challenges empire. Humiliation sparks takeover attempt. Commentators debated motives. Some admired her courage. Others mocked her audacity. Social media lit up, hashtags trending worldwide. Richard seat 35 to CEO and never move back. In coffee shops and offices, strangers whispered about the woman who had been kicked out of first class and was now aiming to own the airline. That evening, Maya and Daniel convened again. The suite felt heavier, the air thick with tension. "We've stirred the nest," Daniel said. "Now Collins will strike back." Maya leaned against the table, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "Then we'll be ready." He studied her closely. "And if you lose?" Her eyes flickered, not with doubt, but with the raw honesty of someone who understood risk. "If I lose," she said softly, "then at least I'll lose standing in the light, not hidden in the back row." The room fell silent. Outside, the city lights glittered against the darkening sky, each one a reminder of countless lives unfolding at once. Maya closed her notebook, the vow still etched across its page. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. Tomorrow Collins would make his move. But tonight, as the rain pattered against the glass and the world buzzed with speculation, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded, her breath steady. She remembered her father's words once more. Rise higher. She whispered them aloud, just once, into the stillness. And the city seemed to echo back. Higher. The boardroom of Aerosky's headquarters shimmered with cold light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the London skyline. But no one in the room admired it. The directors sat in high-backed leather chairs around a polished oak table, their faces guarded, waiting. The air buzzed with tension, as if the glass walls themselves could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. Edward Collins entered first. His stride was sharp, his jaw tight, his tailored navy suit immaculate. He carried the confidence of a man who had ruled this company for more than a decade. To him, this was his empire, and today was about crushing rebellion before it grew teeth. He took his place at the head of the table, his voice steady but edged with disdain. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to address a unwelcome disruption to our company's stability. Dr. Maya Johnson has been making noise in the markets, acquiring shares. Let's be clear, this is a personal vendetta dressed up as strategy. Nothing more. He looked around, waiting for nods. Some directors shifted uneasily, but none spoke. The double doors opened again. Maya Johnson stepped in. She wasn't draped in power suits or dripping in jewelry. She wore a simple charcoal dress, her natural curls framing her face. No spectacle, no theatrics, just presence. She walked calmly to the empty chair across from Collins. As she sat, she offered a polite nod to the board. "Thank you for allowing me the space to speak," she said softly, her voice carrying without strain. Collins scoffed. "We'll give you 5 minutes. After that, we return to real business." Maya folded her hands. 5 minutes will do." She let the silence stretch for a moment, forcing every pair of eyes to remain on her. Then she began. "Last week, I was told to move to the back of a plane I had paid full fare to sit in. Not because of a booking error, not because I lacked credentials, but because someone decided I didn't look the part of a first-class passenger." The words fell heavy in the boardroom. A few directors glanced away. Others shifted uncomfortably. I complied. Maya continued. "I sat in row 35 next to strangers, pressed into a seat too small for my frame, while a man in first class laughed at me. I sat there, humiliated, but not broken. And as I stared at the tray table in front of me, I thought if they can deny me dignity here, they can deny it to anyone." She paused, letting the weight of the memory settle. "This is not about one flight attendant. This is about culture, leadership, responsibility. The culture of Aerosky allowed that moment to happen, and as long as it stands unchanged, it will happen again to someone without a voice, without a platform, without the means to fight back." Collins leaned forward, his smile thin and sharp. "And you expect us to believe this crusade of yours is about passengers, not about your ego." Maya met his gaze. Her eyes did not waver. "This isn't about my ego, Mr. Collins. This is about your failure." Gas flickered around the table. Collins' face reddened. "You've run this company for years," Maya said evenly. "And in that time, Aerosky has faced lawsuits, customer complaints, declining satisfaction scores. You dismissed consultants who offered solutions. You ignored employees who raised concerns. And now you face me not because I want revenge, but because the people who trust this airline deserve better." Collins slammed a hand on the table. "This is my company." Maya's voice remained calm, but firm. "No, This company belongs to its shareholders, to the passengers who fill its seats, to the employees who wear its uniforms. You have simply held the keys. A silence deeper than any before stretched across the room. One director, a woman with silver hair named Margaret Foster, spoke first. Her tone was measured, but her eyes betrayed something relief, perhaps, or quiet defiance. She makes a fair point. Edward. Collins whipped his head toward her. Margaret. But another director chimed in. Robert Sterling, his voice steady. Edward. The numbers don't lie. Our brand has suffered under your leadership. Customer satisfaction has fallen. Complaints are up. The market doesn't trust us. Perhaps change is overdue. The balance in the room shifted. Collins saw it. His jaw clenched, his fists tight. You're siding with her, he demanded. With an outsider, a woman who knows nothing of running an airline. Maya rose slowly to her feet. I know what it is to run something greater than an airline. I've run a company where respect isn't negotiable, where every employee, every client, every partner knows they belong. That's not just good ethics, that's good business. And Aerosky can be that kind of company if you let it. Her voice deepened with conviction. But if you won't, then I will. She placed a folder on the table. Inside commitments from shareholders, representing a controlling interest. This, she said, is not noise. This is change. The room erupted in whispers. Collins's face drained of color. You think you can take my seat, he hissed. Maya looked him in the eye, her tone almost gentle. I don't need to take your seat. Mr. Collins, you've already given it away. The directors exchanged looks. Some nodded subtly. Sterling spoke again. Firmer this time. Edward, the board will vote. But I'll say this leadership is not about clinging to power. It's about serving people. And right now, Dr. Johnson seems to understand that better than you. Collins sank back into his chair, his confidence crumbling. Maya remained standing, her posture straight, her voice calm. I didn't come here to be celebrated. I came here to remind you all of something simple. Dignity has no class. Whether row 2A or row 35, every person deserves respect. If Aerosky can't promise that, then Aerosky has no future. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The meeting adjourned, but the echoes of her words lingered. As she walked out of the boardroom, Daniel waiting just beyond the doors, Maya felt her pulse steady. The fight wasn't over. Collins would not surrender easily. But the tide had turned, and for the first time since that night in row 35, she felt the horizon tilting in her favor. The next morning, London awoke to a storm, not of rain, but of headlines. Across every newsstand, on every screen in cafes and offices, the story blazed, Black CEO humiliated in first class. Now she's taking over Aerosky. The photograph chosen was grainy, snapped by a fellow passenger who had quietly recorded the incident. It showed Maya standing in the aisle, calm yet visibly displaced, while Linda Harris gestured toward the back of the plane. Gregory White's smirk was caught mid-frame, a cruel echo of the laughter that had followed her humiliation. Social media devoured the story. The hashtags multiplied. Never move back. Deceit 35-0. Dignity has no class. Clips replayed endlessly a fellow traveler's shaky phone video. Maya's quiet words to Linda, even the way she walked down the aisle with her shoulders straight. Millions of people who had never met her felt, for a moment, as if they were her. In cafes, people shook their heads in disbelief. In offices, workers whispered by water coolers, "Can you believe she actually bought the airline?" Parents showed their kids the clip, saying, "This is why You never let anyone tell you where you belong. By noon, television anchors were hosting heated debates. One side praised her as a visionary, a symbol of resilience. Others dismissed it as theatrics, accusing her of exploiting outrage for financial gain. But the tide of public sentiment leaned heavily in her favor. The story had struck something deep, something raw. People didn't just see Maya. They saw themselves every time they'd been underestimated, ignored, or told to move back at Aero Sky headquarters. Edward Collins watched the coverage in his office, face tight with rage. Each headline cut deeper. Each hashtag mocked his authority. His phone buzzed with calls from directors, but fewer of them were supportive now. He slammed it down, pacing. "She's turning the public against us," he muttered. "Against me?" Down the hall, board members huddled quietly in clusters. The directors who once echoed his words now spoke cautiously, weighing their reputations. Margaret Foster moved among them, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She spoke calmly, reminding each of them of the airline's sinking reputation, the lawsuits, the viral humiliation. Slowly, the ground under Collins' feet eroded. Meanwhile, in her London hotel room, Maya sat with Daniel and their small team. Laptops glowed with feeds of coverage. Comments poured in by the thousand strangers offering support. Passengers sharing their own stories of being disrespected or profiled. Employees revealing workplace grievances under the hashtag #MyAeroSkyStory. One tweet stood out. A former flight attendant wrote, "I was told not to upgrade certain passengers because they don't fit the image." Maya's right. This isn't one incident. It's the culture. Maya read it silently, her chest tightening. She turned to Daniel. "It's bigger than me now?" He nodded. "Yes, and that's your greatest strength." The phone rang. It was a producer from BBC's flagship evening news. They wanted her live. Tonight. Maya hesitated. "If I go on air, I need to be precise. This isn't about revenge. It's about reform." Daniel leaned forward. "Then say it in your own words. The world is already listening. Now make them believe." That evening, under the glare of studio lights, Maya sat across from the anchor. Cameras rolled. Millions tuned in. "Dr. Johnson." The anchor began. "The world is captivated by your story. Some call you a hero. Others say this is an overreaction, that one bad experience doesn't justify a corporate takeover. What do you say to that?" Maya took a measured breath. Her voice was calm, steady, with that same unshakable dignity she had carried down the airplane aisle. "I don't call myself a hero," she said. "I'm simply a woman who was told to move to the back. But I didn't move back because of a mistake in a booking system. I was moved because of who I am, and who they thought I wasn't." That's not just my story. That's the story of countless people who are treated as if dignity is something they must earn. I bought these shares because dignity isn't negotiable. Not in row 2A, not in row 35, not anywhere. The studio fell quiet. Even the anchor seemed momentarily disarmed. Maya continued, her voice tightening with passion. "This isn't about punishing Aerosky. It's about saving it. Saving it from a culture that allows humiliation to masquerade as policy. Saving it from leaders who think appearances matter more than respect. I don't want to tear this company down. I want to build it into one where no passenger, no employee, no human being is ever told to move to the back." The clip went viral before the interview even ended. Within hours, it had been viewed 20 million times. Back at Aerosky HQ, Collins watched the broadcast with clenched fists. The directors' phones buzzed relentlessly. Shareholders, journalists, regulators, all demanding answers. His empire of silence and intimidation was collapsing under the weight of a single woman's calm truth. By the end of the week, Aerosky's customer service lines were flooded. Thousands of people called, not to book flights, but to demand reform. Travel bloggers urged boycotts until changes were made. Employee forums swelled with whistleblowers sharing stories of bias and neglect. The pressure mounted. The board scheduled an emergency vote. Collins roared in private meetings, threatening lawsuits, accusing directors of betrayal. But the once loyal nods were gone. All that remained were uneasy glances and murmured excuses. In the quiet of her suite, Maya sat by the window, the Thames flowing dark and steady below. Daniel joined her, placing a folder in her lap. "It's almost time," he said. Maya opened it. Inside were letters of support employees, passengers, ordinary people who had written to thank her for standing up. Some were brief. "Thank you for showing us we matter." Others poured out pages of pain, recounting times they had been dismissed, mocked, moved aside. Maya read until her eyes blurred with tears. She closed the folder and whispered, almost to herself, "This is why." The world wasn't just watching anymore. The world was with her. And Edward Collins, for the first time in his reign, was utterly alone. The board assembled on a gray Friday morning. The sky above London hung heavy with clouds, mirroring the weight in the room. This wasn't an ordinary meeting. Everyone knew the future of Aerosky, and perhaps their own reputations, would be defined in the next few hours. The directors filed into the grand chamber, polished shoes clicking against marble. A hush settled as they took their places around the oval mahogany table. Papers rustled, laptops flickered awake, and whispers floated in the air like nervous birds. Edward Collins arrived first. His once confident stride carried a stiffness now, as if every step resisted gravity. His face was taut, his tie drawn too tight, the dark crescents beneath his eyes betraying sleepless nights. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, lowering himself into the chairman's seat, "we are gathered to defend Aerosky from a hostile takeover orchestrated by someone with no real aviation experience. I trust we all understand what's at stake." Some heads nodded, but others remained still. Margaret Foster sat with her hands clasped, her gaze cool. Robert Sterling leaned back, expression unreadable. The doors opened again. Dr. Maya Johnson entered. She wore the same calm as always, but her presence carried a quiet gravity that filled the chamber. A charcoal suit, understated jewelry, and eyes that revealed no trace of the storm outside. She walked to her seat across from Collins and inclined her head politely. "Thank you for allowing me here today." Collins' smile thinned. "You're here as a courtesy. Dr. Johnson, nothing more." She didn't rise to the bait. She simply folded her hands and waited. The chairman of the governance committee, an older man with white hair, cleared his throat. "We'll hear both sides before a formal vote is taken. Mr. Collins, as sitting CEO, you may begin." Collins launched into his speech, voice booming with manufactured authority. He painted Maya as reckless, her campaign as emotional theater. He spoke of his years at the helm, of profits, of expansion into new markets. He dismissed the viral story as an isolated incident exaggerated by media hysteria. "We cannot," he thundered, "allow this company to fall into the hands of someone who buys shares out of spite. Leadership requires more than a bruised ego and a social media storm. It requires vision. It requires experience, and I am that experience." When he finished, silence hung in the room. Collins looked around expectantly. But the nods were fewer now, the eyes less certain. The chairman turned to Maya. Dr. Johnson, your statement. Maya rose slowly. She did not shout. She did not pace. She spoke with a quiet force that carried further than Colin's bluster. This isn't about ego. It's about culture. A week ago, I was told to move to the back of a plane I had paid to sit in. That moment wasn't an accident. It was a symptom of a culture that dismisses, humiliates, and excludes. She looked around the room, meeting each director's gaze. Culture comes from the top. Mr. Collins has been at the top for 12 years. In those 12 years, Aerosky has seen lawsuits, declining customer trust, and an exodus of talent. The numbers don't lie. People don't trust this airline anymore. She placed a folder on the table. Inside are commitments from investors who do believe in change, who believe in an Aerosky where dignity is not optional, where leadership means listening, not dismissing, where every passenger, every employee knows they belong. Her voice tightened, carrying emotion that no one could mistake for performance. I'm not here to take revenge. I'm here because I refuse to let what happened to me happen to anyone else. Not under your watch. Not under mine. The silence afterward was different this time. Heavier. Respectful. Margaret Foster was the first to speak. Dr. Johnson, you speak not just with reason, but with vision. And vision is what we've been lacking. Robert Sterling followed. I've reviewed the numbers. Maya's plan for restructuring is sound. Her commitment is clear. I support her. Murmurs rippled around the table. Directors exchanged glances, calculating the winds of change. Colin slammed his palm against the table. You're fools if you think she can lead. She's never flown a plane, never managed an airline fleet. Never, Maya interrupted softly, but firmly. Leadership isn't about knowing how to fly a plane. Mr. Collins, it's about knowing how to respect the people who do. And that is something you've forgotten. The blow landed harder than any shout. Collins' face flushed crimson. The chairman cleared his throat. We've heard enough. It is time to vote. One by one. The directors cast their ballots. Some voices trembled. Some rang with conviction, but as the count progressed, the result became clear. When the final tally was read, the room seemed to exhale at once. By a majority vote, Edward Collins was removed as CEO. Maya Johnson was elected interim chairwoman. Pending shareholder ratification, the chamber erupted in whispers. Collins' face drained of all color. He rose. His movements jerky, his words a hiss. This isn't over. You'll regret this, all of you. He stormed out, the doors slamming shut behind him. For a moment, the room remained frozen. Then the chairman turned to Maya. Dr. Johnson, the floor is yours. Maya stood, her voice steady though her heart pounded. Thank you. This is not a victory for me. It is a turning point for Aerosky. Today we begin the work of rebuilding trust, of proving that dignity is not a privilege, but a promise. Her eyes swept the room. This company has the power to lead the industry, not by flying higher, but by standing taller. And together we will. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then stronger. Outside, reporters swarmed the plaza, their cameras waiting. Inside, Maya allowed herself a single deep breath. The vote had been cast. The tide had turned. But she knew this was only the beginning. The real work healing a broken culture, setting a new standard, proving herself not just to the board, but to the world still lay ahead. She gathered her notes, nodded to Daniel, who stood in the shadows near the wall, and walked out of the boardroom. The flash of cameras blinded her as the doors opened. Questions flew like arrows, voices clamoring. But she walked forward calmly, her step steady, her expression serene. Because Maya Johnson was no longer the woman in seat 35. She was the woman at the helm of an airline. The plaza outside AeroSky headquarters was a storm of cameras and microphones. Reporters pressed forward, shouting questions, flashes bursting like fireworks. The air buzzed with urgency, history unfolding in real time. Dr. Maya Johnson stepped out of the glass doors, Daniel Brooks by her side. She paused at the top of the steps, allowing the noise to wash over her. Then she raised a hand, not commanding, but steady, and the crowd hushed. Her voice carried clear, unshaken. Today is not about me. Today is about every passenger who has ever felt small, unseen, or dismissed. AeroSky belongs to the people who trust us to carry them safely, with dignity. That trust has been broken, and starting now, we will rebuild it. The reporters leaned forward, pens scratched, cameras zoomed. I am honored to accept the role of interim chairwoman, she continued, but with that honor comes responsibility. Over the coming weeks, we will launch the most comprehensive reform program this company has ever seen. It will be rooted in one principle: dignity has no class. The phrase lit the air. Already tweets flew. Dignity has no class began trending within minutes. Maya outlined the first steps. Mandatory bias training for all staff, from boardroom to baggage handlers, an independent ombuds office to handle complaints, anonymous reporting channels to protect employees who spoke up, quarterly audits of customer satisfaction and service equality, and most importantly, she said, her eyes sweeping the sea of faces, we will listen, not just to shareholders, but to passengers, employees, and the communities we serve. Listening is the foundation of dignity, and we will listen well. Applause broke out, rare for a press scrum. Some reporters even lowered their cameras to clap. For a moment, the plaza felt less like a corporate battlefield and more like a public square where something new had been born. But not everyone was clapping. Inside a nearby car, Edward Collins sat in the back seat, watching the speech on a tablet. His jaw clenched, his fist tight. The glow of the screen lit his face, accentuating the fury etched into every line. She thinks she's won, he muttered. His aide in the front seat shifted uneasily. The board vote was decisive. Sir, perhaps it's time to— Don't say it, Collins snapped. This isn't over. She humiliated me. She stole my company, and I'll burn it to the ground before I let her keep it. The aide swallowed hard, nodding. Collins' eyes never left the screen, where Maya smiled faintly as she stepped away from the podium. That night, news outlets around the world broadcast her words. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. Every major network ran the headline, Maya Johnson, Os Collins promises reforms at AeroSky. Talk shows dissected her every sentence. Analysts praised her clarity. Critics called her naive. But one thing was certain, the world was listening. In a modest home in Detroit, a retired factory worker watched the coverage with tears in his eyes. Harold Johnson, Maya's father, whispered to himself, "That's my girl." He remembered the day he told her to rise higher. And now he saw her carrying that message not just for herself, but for millions. Back in London, Maya and Daniel convened with their small team in the quiet of the hotel suite. The weight of the day pressed down, but so did a new energy, almost electric. You did it, Daniel said simply. Maya shook her head. We started it. Doing it will take more. She pulled out her notebook, the same one she had scribbled in after being forced to seat 35. On a fresh page, she wrote, 3 months, measurable change. visible to the world. Daniel leaned over. Ambitious. Necessary. She replied. We don't have years to earn trust back. We have weeks. The next morning, the reforms began to take shape. Consultants were brought in to design training modules. Lawyers drafted the framework for the Ombuds office. Communications teams prepared campaigns to show transparency. But resistance bubbled beneath the surface. Mid-level managers grumbled about costs. Veteran flight crews muttered that political correctness had taken over. Anonymous leaks hinted at internal sabotage. Daniel flagged the risks. Collins still has allies inside. He'll exploit every crack. Maya nodded. Then we closed the cracks. One by one. She began holding listening sessions with employees. In break rooms, hangars, even on the tarmac. She sat in folding chairs and listened as ground crew, attendants, and mechanics spoke. Some were cautious, some angry, some openly emotional. One attendant, a young man with tired eyes, said quietly, I've worked here 7 years. I've seen passengers treated differently for no reason. I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid I'd lose my job. Maya leaned forward. You won't lose your job for speaking truth here. Not anymore. The word spread faster than any press release. By the end of the week, employees whispered a new phrase in cafeterias and staff lounges. She listens. Meanwhile, Collins plotted. Late at night, in shadowed corners, he met with loyalists. He spoke of lawsuits, of rallying investors, of exposing Maya as unqualified. His pride had become obsession. But as his circle shrank, Maya's circle grew. Passengers wrote letters. Employees sent thank-you notes. Community leaders invited her to speak. Everywhere she went, people told her their stories, their pain, their hopes. And slowly, something deeper than reform began to take shape. A movement. One evening, as rain streaked the windows of the suite, Daniel asked the question that hung in the air. Do you think you can really change them? A company this big, this broken, Maya stared at the rain, her reflection faint in the glass. I don't know, she admitted softly. But I know this, I'd rather try and fail than stay silent and succeed at nothing. Because silence is how cultures like Collins survive. And I won't be silent. The rain tapped harder, as if agreeing. 3 weeks later, Aerosky unveiled its official reform plan. The press crowded into a hangar where a gleaming jet stood as backdrop. Maya took the podium, Daniel at her side, employees filling the first rows. This plan isn't perfect, she said plainly. We will make mistakes. We will stumble, but we will move forward. Because moving forward with dignity is better than standing still in arrogance. She unveiled each measure, independent oversight, new training, a passenger bill of rights, diversity and leadership pipelines. She even announced a foundation to support young aviators from underrepresented backgrounds. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. For a moment, hope filled the air like fuel ready to ignite. But in a shadowed office across the city, Edward Collins watched the broadcast with a bitter smile. He poured himself a drink and whispered, Enjoy your moment, Maya, because I'm not finished. The glossy headlines praising Maya Johnson were barely a week old when the first shadow fell. It started with whispers. An anonymous memo leaked to a trade blog, accusing Aerosky's new leadership of reckless spending and political grandstanding. The document claimed insider sources warned of layoffs and crumbling investor confidence. Within hours, mainstream outlets picked it up. Stock tickers fluttered. Commentators smirked on business channels. Too fast. Too ambitious. One analyst sneered inside her office. Maya read the memo in silence. Daniel Brooks paced behind her, fuming. "It's Collins," he said finally. "No one else benefits from this. He's playing dirty." Maya closed the laptop. Her face was calm, but her pulse raced. "If it's him, he left fingerprints, and we'll find them." The next morning, the storm intensified. Collins appeared on a rival network, suit immaculate, tone dripping with concern. "I wish Dr. Johnson the best," he said, voice silky. "But her inexperience shows. You can't run an airline with slogans. My fear is passengers and employees will suffer while she experiments." The interviewer nodded, indulging his narrative. By the next day, hashtags appeared. Maya experiment. 2 green to lead. At the same time, anonymous accounts pushed stories about canceled flights, exaggerated delays, even fabricated crew complaints. Daniel dropped a thick folder on Maya's desk. Coordinated. Same language, same timing. "This is a campaign?" Maya flipped through the pages. Lies, distortions, half-truths, a portrait being painted of chaos. She leaned back, exhaling. "He's not trying to win. He's trying to exhaust me. Make me stumble." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Then don't stumble." That evening, Maya appeared on national television, calm, poised, eyes steady. "Let me be clear," she told the anchor. "Aerosky is not collapsing. Flights are operating. Employees are showing resilience. Are we changing fast? Yes. Are there growing pains? Of course. But dignity and fairness are not experiments. They are necessities." The anchor leaned in, and Collins' allegations. She smiled faintly. "I don't answer to bitterness. I answer to passengers and employees, and they will see results." Her composure cut through the noise, but Collins wasn't finished. 2 days later, a new scandal broke. Confidential documents appeared online. Supposed expense reports showing Maya authorizing lavish spending, private chefs, luxury hotels, even jewelry. Tabloids feasted. Commentators howled. The words hypocrite and corrupt trended. Daniel slammed the papers on the table. "These are forged. I can prove it." But Maya knew damage didn't need truth to stick. Perception was enough. She called her team together. "We respond with transparency. Open every file, every receipt, every record. Nothing hidden." For 72 hours, her staff worked without sleep, publishing documents, inviting independent auditors, answering every question. Slowly, the truth emerged. The expenses were fake. Digital forgeries traced back to a shell company. Daniel brought the evidence to her. Guess who controls the shell? Collins' cousin. The revelation detonated across the media. Headlines flipped Collins linked to forged smear campaign. Lawmakers called for investigation. Collins denied. But the stink clung. Still, the damage was real. Investors grew skittish. Passengers nervous. Maya faced restless employees demanding reassurance. One night, long after midnight, she sat alone in her office. The city lights stretched below like rivers of fire. Her notebook lay open. "Resilience isn't silence," she wrote. "It's speaking steady when storms scream loudest." The next morning, she held an all-hands town hall. Thousands of employees tuned in. Her voice was measured, but each word rang like steel. "You've heard the noise. You've seen the lies. And some of you may wonder, can we survive this? I tell you yes, because truth outlasts lies, and dignity outlasts fear. Aerosky is not just an airline. It's a promise, and together we keep that promise." The chat flooded with applause emojis, words of support, even tears. A flight attendant messaged, "I almost quit. But hearing you today, I'm staying." Across the city, Collins hurled a glass against the wall. "She's stronger than I thought," he muttered. His aide hovered nervously. "We may need to escalate," the aide whispered. Collins turned, eyes cold. "Then escalate we will." A week later, a whistleblower inside Aerosky's maintenance division came forward. He claimed Collins had pressured managers for years to falsify safety records, ignored engine checks, skipped inspections, cut corners to save money. The story broke wide open. Congressional hearings were announced. Collins was subpoenaed. Suddenly, the man painting Maya as reckless was exposed as reckless himself, with passengers' lives. Maya didn't gloat. She stood before cameras, calm as ever. This isn't about one man's downfall. It's about the culture he created. And our job is to replace that culture with integrity. That's what justice looks like, not revenge, but reform. Her words resonated. Passengers posted photos boarding flights with captions like, "Flying with dignity." Employees shared stories of small changes, crew treated equally, passengers respected, complaints handled swiftly and slowly. Aerosky's reputation began to recover. But Collins wasn't finished. From the shadows, he made one last move. A network of lobbyists, lawyers, and loyalists began plotting a hostile lawsuit, aiming to freeze Maya's reforms and drag her into endless litigation. The battle was far from over. Edward Collins was cornered, but not defeated. After the maintenance scandal broke, his reputation crumbled in Washington and on Wall Street. Yet Collins was nothing if not ruthless. When the boardrooms closed their doors to him, he turned to the courts. The morning headlines hit like thunder. Collins files, $500 million suit against Aerosky CEO. The lawsuit accused Maya Johnson of defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of reputational harm. It was a legal bazooka, designed less to win than to wound. Inside her office, Maya skimmed the thick complaint, her fingers steady on the pages. Daniel Brooks leaned against the window, arms folded, eyes blazing. "This isn't justice," he spat. "It's harassment with a gavel." Maya closed the folder. "It's noise dressed in robes, but we'll answer it." The next weeks were a blur of filings and hearings. Collins' lawyers moved swiftly, flooding the docket with motions. Cable pundits replayed his sound bites. I was targeted, slandered, destroyed. Old allies emerged, eager to amplify his victim narrative. Maya refused to hide. She met the press outside the courthouse, each appearance measured, never defensive. "I respect the judicial process," she said, "but I will not be intimidated into silence. The truth is our shield, and it will stand." Her calmness infuriated Collins. He wanted her rattled, cornered, reactive. Instead, she projected composure, even under siege. The trial became more than a legal fight. It was a battle for narrative. Supporters rallied online with hashtags like Tower Stand With Maya and Tao Truth in Flight. Passengers shared stories of dignity restored on flights. Flight crews filmed short videos. "This is the best leadership we've had in years." Collins' side pushed just as hard. Dark money groups funded smear ads. Billboards appeared in key cities. "Is your airline safe?" Under Johnson, anonymous robocalls urged shareholders to demand her resignation. In court, Collins sat smug in tailored suits, whispering to his attorneys. Maya sat upright, hands folded, gaze steady. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every passenger who had been told they didn't belong. The proceedings dragged on. One morning, the judge denied Maya's motion to dismiss, meaning the case would go to discovery. Collins grinned as reporters shoved microphones in his face. Daniel caught Maya's eye. He thinks this is victory." She shook her head softly. "It's only delay. Delay isn't destiny." Behind the scenes, her legal team uncovered patterns, shell accounts linked to Collins' allies, payments to consultants tied to smear campaigns. Piece by piece, they assembled a portrait not of a victim, but of a saboteur. The turning point came during a tense deposition. Collins sat across from Maya's attorney, smirking as he dodged questions. Then her counsel slid a document across the table, a wire transfer from Collins' holding company to the shell firm behind the forged expense reports. For the first time, his smile faltered. Cameras weren't allowed, but word leaked quickly. Maya's team cornered Collins. One headline read, "Proof of smear payments emerges." The court of public opinion shifted like a tide. Talk shows dissected the evidence. Investors whispered that Collins had overplayed his hand. Even former allies grew quiet. Still, the legal battle raged. Collins's attorneys filed objections, sought delays, anything to muddy the waters. Maya's patience was tested daily. At night, she'd return to her apartment overlooking the river, exhaustion heavy in her bones. Sometimes she'd think of her father, Harold Johnson, telling her as a child storms pass, "Maya, you don't stop them. You stand until the sky clears." One evening, she found herself whispering those words aloud, staring out at the rain. By spring, the trial reached its climax. Courtrooms overflowed. Reporters lined the halls. Viewers tuned in like it was sport. Collins' attorney thundered about reputations destroyed. Maya's counsel spoke quietly but firmly about lies, forgeries, and years of systemic neglect under Collins' watch. When Maya herself took the stand, the room hushed. She spoke of the flight where it began, of being told to leave her seat, not because of policy, but prejudice, of choosing not to shout, but to act. "I didn't buy an airline for revenge," she said, her voice even. "I bought it to prove dignity has a seat at the table. That's not defamation, that's transformation." The words rippled through the courtroom. Some jurors blinked back tears. Collins rose for rebuttal, but his voice cracked. His fury rang hollow against her quiet conviction. In the weeks that followed, the judge dismissed the bulk of Collins' claims, ruling they lacked merit. The remaining issues dragged, but the tide had turned. Even as technicalities lingered, the world had chosen its verdict. Editorials praised Maya's resilience. Passengers cheered her transparency. Employees rallied behind her leadership. Aerosky's stock rebounded. Bookings climbed, and Collins, his empire of influence, withered. The lawsuit meant to cripple her had instead exposed him. He was left with legal bills, crumbling credibility, and a legacy of failure. One afternoon, as Maya left the courthouse, reporters surged forward. "Dr. Johnson, do you consider this a victory?" She paused on the steps, the city buzzing around her. "This isn't about me winning," she said softly. "It's about all of us refusing to lose to fear. Justice is not revenge, it's repair. And repair is what we'll keep doing." The crowd erupted in applause. Hashtags soared. Employees texted her with simple words, "Thank you for standing tall." The lawsuit wasn't over in the technical sense. Appeals would be filed, motions argued. But the battle that mattered, the battle for trust, for dignity, for the soul of an airline, was won. And Maya knew the story was no longer about a lawsuit. It was about a legacy still being written. The spring sun spilled across New York as if the city itself had chosen to breathe again. Maya Johnson stood at the window of her corner office, gazing at the skyline. The courthouse battles were not entirely finished. But the verdict that mattered public trust was clear. Aerosky had survived. More than that, it was beginning to thrive. Bookings ticked upward. Employees spoke with pride again. Passengers, once wary, posted selfies in cabins with captions like "flying with dignity." What began as a scandal was turning into a movement. Daniel Brooks entered, carrying a folder but wearing a rare smile. "Numbers are in," he said. "Revenue up 7% this quarter. Complaint calls cut nearly in half. The changes are sticking." Maya turned from the glass. "It's not just numbers, Daniel. It's people finally feeling they belong." He set the folder down. "That's what makes it work." Still, she knew symbols mattered. A new name, a new identity to mark the break from the old culture. Weeks of brainstorming ended with one phrase that captured the spirit New Dawn Airlines. On the morning of the rebrand, employees gathered in hangars and terminals across the country. Planes gleamed with fresh livery, sunrise orange sweeping across deep blue. Maya stood on a stage at JFK International, the same airport where humiliation had once sparked everything. She paused before the microphone, remembering the sting of Linda Harris's voice, the jeers from Gregory White, the silent complicity of Mark Thompson. That pain had been real, sharp, unforgettable, but it had carried her here. "Today," she began, "we turn the page. Aerosky is no more. Welcome to New Dawn Airlines, a name that reminds us every day begins with light and with choice. We choose respect. We choose dignity. We choose each other." The crowd roared. Mechanics clapped grease-stained hands. Flight attendants cheered. Even passengers watching live-streamed tears of hope in the chat. Later, Daniel found her backstage. "You realize," he said, "this is bigger than an airline now. It's a blueprint." She nodded quietly. That's the point. In the months that followed, reforms deepened. The Ascend method training became mandatory 3 days of empathy, crisis de-escalation, and service rooted in dignity. Independent auditors reviewed complaints in real time. Promotion paths opened for employees long overlooked. Stories emerged. A young black attendant shared how passengers now looked at her with new respect. A Muslim pilot spoke of finally praying in uniform without side glances. A Latina gate agent described how elderly travelers thanked her for listening instead of brushing them aside. Every testimony stitched another thread into a fabric of change. Yet Maya never pretended perfection. At town halls, she admitted mistakes. "We'll stumble," she said. "But stumbling isn't falling. It's proof we're moving." Her honesty drew loyalty. Employees stopped fearing retaliation for speaking up. Passengers began to forgive small delays, trusting the company's intent. The transformation caught national attention. Business schools assigned case studies. Lawmakers cited New Dawn Airlines in hearings on corporate accountability. Civil rights groups called it a living model of reform. Through it all, Maya remained steady. Not triumphant, not bitter steady. One evening, months after the relaunch, she sat with her father Harold on his porch in Atlanta. The cicadas hummed, and the smell of cut grass drifted in the air. "You've carried a heavy load," Harold said, rocking gently. Maya smiled. "I just didn't want anyone else's daughter told she didn't belong." He looked at her, eyes moist. "And you built something that makes belonging possible." She took his hand, letting silence say the rest. The final blow to Collins came quietly. His appeals failed. Fines mounted. Former allies deserted him. He became a cautionary tale, mentioned in lectures not as a leader, but as a lesson. Maya never gloated. When asked about him, she said only, "We all leave footprints. His show where bitterness leads. Ours must show where dignity can go. By year's end. New Dawn Airlines was named the top carrier in passenger satisfaction. Profits rose, but more importantly, trust soared. At the annual shareholders meeting, Maya closed with words that echoed far beyond the hall. We are not defined by where we sit on a plane. We are defined by how we treat each other when we fly. This airline was born from pain, but it will live on in hope. Every boarding pass is not just a ticket. It's a promise that dignity has no class, no section, no price. The applause thundered. Investors stood. Employees wept. Passengers watching online typed the same 3 words again and again in "We belong here." And so the story that began with humiliation in first class ended with transformation in every class. Maya Johnson's name would be remembered not just for buying an airline, but for proving what leadership looked like when it chose repair over revenge and light over darkness. For every child who had ever been told, "You don't belong." New Dawn Airlines was proof that they did. And that, Maya thought as she walked off the stage, was the legacy worth every battle. The story of Maya Johnson reminds us that life will always test us in moments we least expect. Humiliation can arrive suddenly, without warning, in a crowded room or even on a quiet flight. Yet what defines us is not the insult itself, but how we choose to answer it. Maya did not allow anger to consume her. She did not let bitterness dictate her response. Instead, she turned a moment of exclusion into an opportunity for transformation, not just for herself, but for thousands of employees and millions of passengers. For older generations, this lesson is timeless. Dignity is not something given by others, it is carried within us. And when we protect it with calm courage, it becomes stronger than prejudice, stronger than fear. In our own lives, we may not buy airlines or rewrite corporate culture, but we can choose to respond with integrity when challenged, to see each insult as a chance to shape a better tomorrow. In doing so, we leave behind more than memories, we leave a legacy of respect. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world and helps us continue bringing powerful stories of dignity, justice, and hope to life.